Haynu from Shabbos Parshas Tzav, Shabbos Hagadol, Ches Nissen, Tavshin Mem Ches. Abodem Haynu Lepari B'Mitzrayim B'Cholum. We were servants, slaves to Pari in Mitzrayim. Rebbe says this is a Shabbos Hagadol Maimer, so he speaks about the connection of this with Shabbos Hagadol. Again, like our custom is, Shabbos Hagadol Lacher Mincha Oimrim Abodem Hayinu. After Shabbos Hagadol, after Mincha, we begin saying the part of Haggadah, which begins with Abodem Hayinu, Ad L'chaper Al Kol Aveinu Seinu, till the section that says L'chaper Al Kol Aveinu Seinu, which is after Dayenu Alachas Kam V'Kam. Features separate poetry, like my father-in-law, the Friedrich Rebbe, related. This was the custom of his father, the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe concludes from that. If this was something that the Friedrich Rebbe says his father did, the Rebbe Rashab did, so it's understood. So too was the custom of the Rebbeim prior to the Rebbe Rashab, Ad Rabbeinu Azakin, until the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe says even going higher in holiness, even prior to the Alter Rebbe as well. It's known the mimer that's recorded about this part, Avodim Hayinu, that's in the Sefer called Siddur with Chassidus of the Middle Rebbe, like we will talk about further in Ois Beis. Shudrush Rabbeinu Azakin, it's a mimer of the Alter Rebbe, that was written and transcribed by the Middle Rebbe, like it says in the introduction to the Siddur and Dach, the Siddur with Chassidus. Right over there it says the Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe, the way the Middle Rebbe had transcribed it. Yeshalov, and this mimer there's also Gambi Yurim Be'aris. That's Tzemach Tzedek. There's also explanations and notes of the Tzemach Tzedek. That's all also printed in his Sefer of the Tzemach Tzedek called Oir HaTorah. In other words, what the Rebbe is trying to bring out over here is that the three fathers of Chassidus, as he's about to say, all participated and contributed to this mimer that we're going to explain. Nimtza comes out, Shedrush and Nemar, the Shloishes of his Chassidus comes out. This mimer was said by the three fathers of Chassidus, Admor Azokin, Admor Emtzoy, Tzemach Tzedek, Alter Rebbe, the Middle Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek. Yedua Pisgim Chassidim Arishonim, like it's on the aphorism of the early Chassidim, Gimel Nesim Arishonim Nikroim B'Shem Shloishes of his Chassidus, that the first three Rabbeim are called by this term the three forefathers of Chassidus. Move on. Gam Hashem Admur Emtzoy, like it's also understood from the name, the Mittler Rebbe. When we say the Mittler Rebbe, means he's in the middle between one and another. So in other words, there's one end, there's the other end, and he's in the middle. So it comes out, Haynu Emtzoy Mashloisha, he's the middle one of three. In other words, so the whole package is three, the three forefathers of Chassidus, just like Klal Yisrael has three forefathers. The same thing, there's the three forefathers of Chassidus. That's the Alter Rebbe, the Middle Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek, and all of them, they participated in and contributed to the Maimer of Avodim Hayinu. But as in all Ma'amarim, it didn't stop over there. So too in the Ma'amarim of Rabbeim and Nesim that follow this. By prefacing, in addition to the fact that everyone repeated the Maimer of the earlier one. In other words, the Tzemach Tzedek repeated what the Middle Rebbe, and the Middle Rebbe said over what the Alter Rebbe did, and the Rebbe Rashab explained what and repeated what the Rebbe Marash said. Va'adla oifen, Sha'atoyra nikras al shmoi. To such a degree did he review it and repeat it that it now is called his Torah. Lefisha Masar Nafshe Alzeh, because he totally gave up his life for it, like it says, the Chazal explained that the Torah, the Chamish Chumshei Torah, is called Torah Moshe. Why is it called Torah Moshe? It's Torah Hashem. Chazal explained, Lefisha Masar Nafshe, because Moshe Rabbeinu devoted himself, gave up his life for it, sacrificed himself. for the Torah. Therefore, it's called Torah's Moshe. The same way the Rebbe extends that idea that all the Rabbeim, even though they were only reviewing what the previous Rabbeim said, but the very fact that he completely devoted himself to that mimer and to reviewing it and giving it over, that became also called the mimer of the Rebbe Marash. It's the mimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe. It's the mimer of the Tzemach Tzedek and so on. So in addition to that connection that every one of the Rabbeim had with their Mamorim, every one of the Rabbeim added and contributed something to the topic of his own, in addition to what Alter Rebbe said, the Middle Rebbe contributed, in addition to what the Middle Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek contributed, and so on. Especially, this topic, Avdim, Haynu, Lepara, Bמצרים, is not just one detail in the Torah. Yeah, Avdim, Haynu, we need to understand what that means. Like many things, there are many details in the Torah that can be analyzed and explained in all the levels of the Torah, including Pori Chassidus. But this topic is more than just a detail. It's a general topic that touches on the entire the entire Torah. The pasuk Avdim Haynu is an answer to the question. The Rebbe says, or as people like to call it, not question, but a challenge. Kushya is more than a question. The difficulty, the problem that the Ben Chacham has. How do we? Because we see that his question was, when your son asks you, what are the Eidos Chukim Mishpatim? The response is Avdim Haynu, like we're soon going to say. Now the Rebbe is going to bring in something that we mentioned in passing in a previous mimer. So the Rebbe says like this: Shapirush the Ben Chacham, that the meaning of the phrase Ben Chacham. So the Rebbe first says what it doesn't mean. So he says Loi Ben Shel Chacham. It doesn't mean Ben Chacham. He's the child of a Chacham. Ben Chacham, Chaim Ben Yosef. He's the son of Yosef. So you might think Ben Chacham means the son of a Chacham. That's not what it means. Another thing that it doesn't mean v'gam loy ba lahoris al katanusay Ben. It doesn't also indicate that he's small, that he's young, that he's only a Ben. He's only a child. Like I mentioned last time, the common envisioning that we have of the Keneged Arba Banim Divrei Torah, that's talking about the 4 children that are sitting by the Seder table. There's this Gishmaki little Yingle, the Ben Chacham, and there's this troublemaker that always gets sent out of class. There's the Ben Rosha, and then there's the guy that's wearing the dunce cap on his head, the Ben, the Tam, and so on. No, we don't mean children specifically, as in young, small minors. Rather, the meaning of the word Ben over here is al derech haloshen Ben choyre. The Gemara, when speaking about a free person versus a person that is a servant, whether it's a Hebrew servant, whether it's a non-Jewish servant, so he uses the term, the Chazal use the term Ben choyre. Ben choyre means not the son of someone that's free, and not a child that's free. But it means the expression Ben, and in that case also the idea of bar mitzvah, is the same concept. It doesn't mean either a son born to a mitzvah. It also doesn't mean a child that is observing mitzvahs, but rather the Ben indication is shemitziusa he mitzius shel that his existence, being a son of that thing, a son of freedom, means that is his true entire being. He's a being of true freedom. And another example of this is similar to that we have the expression, let's say, in Pirkei Avos, there's Ben Esrim, there's Ben Shloishim, there's Ben Meah. There's 100-year-old man. He's not a child. We call him Ben Meah. So what's the significance of calling him Ben Meah? Why don't you just say someone who is Meah Shana? Why don't the Chazal use this term Ben? What is the definition of the word Ben? So the Rebbe explains, when we use the term Ben, it means not just someone that has reached biologically 100 years of age. The Ben indicates that he is at the complete and totality and the perfection of what it means to be 100. That's the term Ben Meah, Ben Chayrin, and also Ben Chacham. So he says further on, Ben Chacham, in a similar vein, Ben Chacham means his entire being is permeated with the idea of wisdom. How do we see this? We can see it from the way Chassidus, the weight that Chassidus gives to the question of the Ben Chacham. You could see how filled with Chachma he is. Ben Chacham, in the explanation of the question of the Ben Chacham, he knows and recognizes the distinct differences between Eidos, Chukim, and Mishpatim. On this basis, because he knows what Eidos are as distinct from Chukim, as distinct from Mishpatim, that is the foundation for his question. Why, or not why, but just what are these Eidos, Chukim, and Mishpatim? Therefore, because it is so significant, his question, therefore his response, or the response to this question, which the response is Avodim Hayinu is in Torah, because Torah is the true Chachma. The Chachma and the will of Hashem, that is the Chachma of the Torah. So therefore, the whole reason why the Rebbe was bringing this out is to say the following. The calls and movement from all this understood is Zel Inyan Ikri V'Kloli, that this is a general type of thing. This is a level of something that is very major and important, and therefore, if we're analyzing Avodim Hayinu, which is such a general idea in the Torah and part of the Chachma Amitis of the Torah, and not just a detail in the Torah, but an answer to a Chacham whose entire being is about the Chacham Torah. So therefore, every one of the Rabbeim's additions and so on are very vital and crucial and have even more weight than when it's just explained seemingly another part of the Torah, which is only a detail. So first we have to explain the meaning of what it says. We were servants and slaves to Pari Mitzrayim, Chef Shoris, Linyan Abdus Vashib. The possibility for the idea of slavery and subjugation, Avodim Hayinu, Lefi, Matzav Haruchni Hoysav Knas Pari. It's because our spiritual level was in the way of Pari. Avodim Hayinu, why? Because it was Lepari. Because there was Pari, what Pari signifies, that's why there could be the idea of enslavement. What is Pari? Pari is Oisius HaOidif, like we had also in the previous Maimon. It's the same letters like the word, the neck. What does that indicate spiritually? Is the spiritual idea of the neck in our spiritual sense. Will be understood from the neck by a person down here below. How do we bring a proof from a person down here below on the spiritual ideas of the neck? Nikra Adam al Shem Ed Malalian. He's called an Adam because he is similar and likened to above. That's the idea of the whole definition of the word Adam, or one of the definitions that Chassidus likes to bring down. Therefore, because we are Ed Mila Elyon, because we are likened to above, we can derive and understand the spiritual idea of the neck from the physical neck of a person. But the Rosh Hashanah explained in this mimer that we're quoting before from the Midler Rebbe and so on, Shahefres ben Oidef Leponim, who the difference between the neck and the face is Shabbaton of Shaladam is Gala, Iker Pnimis Achayis, Veritzoina Pnimi. In the face of the person is revealed the main level of the person's chayis, of the inner level of the person's chayis, the most intense, if you will, the most revealing part of the person's life force of energy and his will. As opposed to the person's neck. In general, looking at the person's neck, back. Well, we're using over here the word neck to indicate the back in general. We do not see the revelation of the inner life force and his will in the face. First of all, you can see by the person's expression. He's smiling, is he scowling? You can see by his eyes, etc. These are things that are expressing their inner passion and desire and will and life and so on. The neck, you will often not be able to tell anything about the person's inner life, what's going on inside of them internally by looking at the person's neck. Always sees the external life and the will. In other words, you see that he's alive. You might see him reaching for something or looking at something, but you don't know if this is really what he's interested in or really what he's about or not. So, therefore, let's look at this now in the spiritual sense, that Oida is the part where it's only the external, not the internal life force. When the inner will of above, not in the state of revelation. So, then from that it's possible to be the idea of the literal pare down here, the physical pare that enslaved the Yidden, and not just is there a pare b'chlal, but it's worse than that. Until it becomes a subjugation to pare. We were slaves to pare Mitzrayim. It all begins when only the external life force is what's revealed. In other words, using simple terms, Hashem's inner will, the Pnimius Harotz, is in Yidden, Torah. Everything else he wants because of Yidden. He wanted to create the world, wanted and therefore created the nations of the world. He wanted and created everything else for the sake of the inner. When you don't differentiate, when all you see is the external will, so then it's possible for the goals to become subsumed and lost in the means to bring those goals. So when there's only the external will shining, so then you don't see a difference, chas v'sholem, between Yidden and the nations can enslave the Yidden. Because Hashem wanted the Goyim, Hashem wanted the Yidden. You're not seeing the inner will of Hashem revealed. But when the inner will of Hashem is revealed, then we see the purpose and the goal is in Yidden and in Torah. Then there's no room for enslavement. How can the Yidden, who are the purpose of the world, be enslaved by a power and an entity and a nation that is only from Hashem's external will meaning that they are only there to serve the Yidden and do and help the Yidden out in Torah mitzvah. Any last paragraph on second page of the Mimer. So now the Rebbe adds to what the Mimer speaks about the idea of the Oiref. Now, why is it Avodim Hayinu Pas? Because there was a level of Aroi, the level of Oiref. So he says, the very fact that could be in the existence of Paroi, which is really something, the physical Paroi down here is a result of Oiref, the neck above, Chitzonius, Harotz, the external will. This is like the continuation of the pasuk that it says in Mitzrayim. Avodim hayinu lefaroi b'Mitzrayim. B'Mitzrayim enables paroi, which causes the level of avodim hayinu. היינו שנעשה the inyan shel meitzer v'tzimtzum. This occurs and happens through Mitzrayim, which is about constraints and constriction. The idea behind this is the inyan of Chitzonius Harotz, and the idea of the neck, which is the external will of Hashem. When can the Chitzonius Harotz appear? When can the external will appear? Only in an area, in a level of elikus, of godliness, where there's already divisions and distinctions, where you see there is external and internal. If there would be no distinctions, the external will be completely subsumed and absorbed in the internal. The reason why there's Chitzonius and Pnimius Haratzin in existence is because there was a division. And when there is a division, then it's possible then it's possible that only the external will become revealed and not the inner will, because the Chitzonius is something that stands on its own, separate from the Pnimius. So we have the Chitzonius today. And because sometimes there's the external will revealed, then we could be slaves and enslaved to Paroi. But on a level where there's no division between the inner and external will, and it's entirely a level of Pnimius, entirely the level of Pnimius Harotz, the level of the face. There is no room for that back and neck. That's why the level of paroi, the level of neck, is applicable only in Mitzrayim. How did we define Mitzrayim? From the word constraints, constriction. Because the constraints, because of the constriction, now became a division between the external will, which is the will of Hashem, to create the worlds, the nations, etc., versus the inner will, which is Hashem wanted Eden, Hashem wanted Torah. Some top of page 5, before you have the constraints, before you have the constriction, when it's revealed the broadness of Hashem, the way he's not constrained, the way he's not constricted. From the perspective of this level, there's no distinction, there's no separation between the inner will to the external will. And then there's no difference between the face and the neck. And all of it is a level of the face, because like the neck is completely subsumed and part of that. For example, this is the idea of kuliponim is a term that he borrows from the Aseres HaDibros. The Aseres HaDibros, it says that the luchas were engraved from all sides. You could read them. Usually, when you have an engraving, especially when the luchas were engraved through and through, so the only way when something is engraved through and through is that you can only read it from, quote unquote, the front, but you can't read it from the back, because the back is gibberish. It's written backwards. But miraculously, Alpines, the Aseres HaDibros were kuliponim. From whatever direction, whatever you side, you looked at it, you could read the Aseres HaDibros. Because that's the idea of Torah. Torah expresses the idea of the Pnimius of Hashem. So that point of the Torah being Hashem's Pnimius is entirely to the exclusion of any Chitzonius. That's the level of, before the Tzimtzum, the level of Merchav Kaf. The Rebbe says this lack of distinction between Chitzonius and Pnimius is similar to another type of lack of distinction that we have in other Mamorim. Shem she'ein hefresh ben yamin u'smoil. Just like there's no difference between the right and the left. That by Hashem we say shekula yamin. That by Hashem it's entirely right. Like the Rebbe explained previously in that year, in Basar Lagani of Tafshin Memches, the year he said this Maimer, being in Pnimius Atik Kaddish, about the inner level of Atik, which itself is the inner level of Keser. Shekula Yamin, it says it's entirely right. Less small of a Hayatika Kabbalah says there's no left in the level of Atik, because when you're dealing with the level, Pnimius Atik is a level prior to constriction, prior to constraints. There's no divisions of levels. When there's no divisions of levels, it's entirely right. And in a similar vein, it's entirely panim. This is also, I believe we learned this in a Maimer that said, Yimin Hashem ador b'koyach, Yimin Hashem tiratz oyev, that by Hashem, it was twice Yimin. There was in Oz Yosher, which was something that we said by Kriyas Yamsuf, commemorating the Nisim of Yitzias Mitzrayim and the continuation of it in Kriyas Yamsuf. We say that also. When you're dealing with going out of Mitzrayim, you're outside of the constraints, then it's entirely Yamin. Yamin Hashem Ador B'Koyach, Yamin Hashem Tiratz Oyev. It's all Yamin. It's all right. Therefore, when we are on a level of Merchav Yudke, when we're on a level that is beyond Mitzrayim, outside of the constraints of Mitzrayim, so then you are there. It's not possible the paroi, which is the neck, the back, the Chitzonius Arotzen, and therefore it's not possible. There's the slavery that could happen when there's Chitzonius Arotzen. So there's A cause B cause C. Avodim hayinu leparoi b'Mitzrayim, because there was constraints. Only when there was a constraint and a constriction in Mitzrayim. From the level of Mitzrayim became the division of the inner will and the external will. Now there's a possibility to be the level of Haroi, when all that's revealed is the external will being revealed, that is the level of Haroi. Haroi is the oirif, the neck, the external will. So then it becomes Avodim. Then Ozai Nasa Idyan Ha'avdus, then it becomes the idea of servitude and enslavement. So that's the crucial pasuk that the Rebbe said is so vital to Torah in general, that we see this unbelievable idea of how enslavement takes over, and that's because of the neck, the external, which is a result of Mitzrayim, of mates. Of course, we don't want to just remain with the problem. We want to have what's the solution to that. So that the Rebbe is going to continue. In Ois Gimel, we'll learn about it tomorrow. What's the solution to overcome this level of slavery and enslavement that's a result of the neck, the external, which is a result of the Mitzrayim.